8 outfield substitutes. That is the number Mikel Arteta was working with on the touchline against Manchester City. Not 9, not 10, 8. And because of that single rule, 3 players who had travelled with the squad, who had trained all week, who were fully available, never got to kick a ball. Ethan Nwaneri stayed on the bench. Gabriel Martinelli stayed on the bench. Gabriel Jesus stayed on the bench. Not injured, not sold, not suspended. Simply not allowed onto the team sheet because of a numbers rule that has nothing to do with football and everything to do with administration. That is where I want to start because it tells you something important before we even talk about the match itself. Arsenal walked into the Community Shield with more strength in depth than the rules would even let them use, and they still won 3-0. Here is what was actually at risk in that moment. If Arteta had picked wrong, if his 8 substitute slots had gone to the wrong players, Arsenal could have been left short against a Manchester City side that still has enough quality to punish any hesitation. One mistake in squad selection, one injury at the wrong time, and suddenly a manager with 3 players warming up in tracksuits unable to help becomes a manager under real pressure. That is the tension sitting underneath a scoreline that otherwise looks comfortable. Before I go further into this, if you want the kind of deeper, calm, fact-based breakdown of Arsenal stories like this one, hit that subscribe button now. I go through everything that is confirmed, everything that is still just talk, and I never blur the two together. Let us get into it properly. Reading the room before the season, even restarts. I want to work through this the way the information actually surfaced, starting with the smaller moments circulating around the club, before moving into the 2 bigger confirmed stories. Each one tells you something different about where Arsenal stand right now. The first piece of context takes us back to May of last year, 2025. At that time, a senior figure at Barcelona was asked directly about Victor Gyokeres. The response was clear. He was described as a great striker who had done excellent things at his previous club. But Barcelona said plainly they were not looking for a player in that position because they already had an established number 9 on their books. I want to be precise about this one because it is easy to misread. This is an old comment, not a current update. It tells you what Barcelona's stance was over a year ago, nothing about where things stand today. I am flagging it clearly as historical context and nothing more. Now compare that to a second piece of chatter, this time framed as breaking news from a prediction market account. The claim here is that movement is expected involving Victor Gyokeres and Barcelona in the coming weeks, with the suggestion that he could be viewed as an option to replace Ferran Torres. I need to be completely straight with you on this one. This is speculation. It is not a confirmed transfer. It is not an official statement, and it should not be treated as fact. I am telling you clearly, this sits in the rumour category, nothing more, until something firmer comes out. Next, we move into territory that is actually confirmed because it comes directly from Arteta's own press conference. He was asked specifically about Christos Tzolis, and his answer was detailed. He described Tzolis as settling into the team organically, called him an intelligent player, and pointed to his composure in the final third as the standout quality, the ability to pick out teammates or finish chances himself once he gets into those dangerous areas. When pushed on whether Tzolis can still improve, Arteta's answer was almost reassuring in its honesty. He said the player has better players around him now, more opportunities are going to come his way, and with his level of quality, the output will rise. He also praised his attitude, describing him as eager to learn and consistent in everything he does. What that tells me as an analyst is simple. This is not empty praise for a new signing to keep the fans happy. This is a manager giving a specific technical explanation for why a summer arrival is already trusted. That matters heading into a long season. From there, Arteta was asked a very different kind of question, this time about Declan Rice and whether he can sustain the same workload as last season. His answer leaned on history rather than promises. He pointed out that Rice has done something similar in each of the last 2 or 3 seasons, so there is already a track record there. He then added something worth noting for anyone thinking about squad management this year. He said he hopes Rice will not need to play at that same volume again, so he can focus more on quality of performance rather than sheer number of games. But he was honest enough to admit that Rice himself will probably push back on that, because the player reportedly wants to play as many as 70 matches this season if he can, driven by wanting to compete for everything. That is a real internal tension worth sitting with. A manager who wants to manage a key midfielder's minutes carefully, paired with a player who wants to play every single one of them. How that gets resolved over the course of a long campaign will say a lot about squad rotation this year. Away from official quotes, there was a fan post circulating that deserves a slightly different kind of attention, because it is not a club statement, it is a supporter's personal take. The post argued that Martin Odegaard remains a world-class player capable of controlling a match on his day, even though the last 12 months have clearly been a difficult stretch for him. The Post pointed to his response for the team during a tough moment against West Ham last season, his role leading Norway through a strong World Cup campaign, and then, most relevantly for us, his performance in the Community Shield, which the Post described as one of his best ever in an Arsenal shirt. I want to separate this clearly for you. The emotional framing is a fan's opinion, but the underlying fact that Odegaard is Arsenal's captain and that he had a strong showing in that Community Shield win lines up with what we know from the match itself. So take the sentiment as fan reaction, but treat the performance claim as grounded in what actually happened on the pitch. Next in the timeline is a transfer name that has not appeared anywhere else in the confirmed stories, Christian Kofane. The claim, sourced through a known transfer aggregator account, is that Arsenal have identified him as a leading option to strengthen the attacking side of the squad, and that he is considered a priority name on their shortlist. I want to be very clear here again. This is reported interest, relayed through a secondary source, not a confirmed approach or a done deal. File this one under early stage transfer chatter until something more concrete follows. Back to confirmed material now, and another direct Arteta quote, this time about Riccardo Calafiori. The description here was detailed and worth breaking down properly. Arteta called him a total player, someone who can be asked to occupy specific zones on the pitch, and praised his natural timing and instinct for arriving in the box to create or score goals. But in the same breath, he was equally clear about the other side of the job, saying Calafiori is also required to fulfill his defensive duties fully. When asked what needs to improve compared to last season, the answer was consistency across his habits, his availability, and what Arteta called his robustness, meaning his ability to stay fit and reliable over a long campaign. This is a manager who clearly rates the player's attacking talent highly, but is publicly setting the bar in terms of physical reliability. That is worth remembering as the season unfolds. And Calafiori himself had something to add, this time speaking about two of his newer teammates, Tzolis and Bruno Guimaraes. His comments focused on how easily new arrivals settle into this Arsenal squad, saying it reflects the way the group receives new players, and that he had felt exactly the same welcome when he joined. He specifically praised the performances of both Tzolis and Guimaraes, noting that Guimaraes, despite being the newest face on the pitch, had already impressed him. That is a small but meaningful signal about dressing room culture, coming directly from a current player rather than an outside observer. From the opposition side, there is a quote worth including because it shows respect without excuse-making. The Manchester City manager, speaking after the defeat, acknowledged that Arsenal have consistently been at the top over the last 5 years, called them a fantastic team that is well managed, and specifically referenced their Premier League title from last season as proof of where they currently stand. He did not stop there, though. He made clear that his own side sees themselves as City, and that their intention is to close that gap and compete again. I think that is a useful marker of where the rivalry currently sits, acknowledged openly by the losing manager himself, not manufactured by pundits or fans. There was also an older post resurfacing, a throwback to 2020, when Arsenal had finished 8th in the league. At that time, a rival manager had commented that he had been in football long enough to read situations in advance, and that what he saw in Arteta convinced him Arsenal would eventually be Arsenal again. I am including this purely as historical context being recirculated by fans in the aftermath of the Community Shield win. It has no bearing on the current squad or the current situation, but it does explain why some of that old commentary is being shared again now, given how the club has developed since then. Then there is a piece of broader media framing worth noting, this time built around a striking statement about Arsenal's midfield options. The framing named 7 players as part of that pool: Odegaard, Rice, Zubimendi, Guimaraes, Lewis Skelly, Eze and Marino, and argued that few teams anywhere possess that level of midfield array. This came from coverage built around how Arsenal's dismantling of Manchester City exposed the depth available to Arteta in that area of the pitch. I want to flag this as media analysis and framing rather than a direct club statement, but it is grounded in a real observation about squad depth that lines up with everything else we have covered here. Finally, closing out this section, there is a longer set of comments from Arteta reflecting on the performance as a whole. He credited the pre-season preparation, and specifically the players' own decisions to return early after the World Cup because they wanted to be part of this group. He said the squad were determined to win the competition because it represented something they had already earned the right to compete for last season. He described being impressed both by how the team played and by how they competed as a unit, calling that the standard the club now holds itself to. When asked whether being champions changes something mentally, his answer was about belief. He said there is now a clearer sense within the group of how to win, what it takes, and how every single player contributed to that success last season, and that the expectation is for exactly the same collective effort to continue. That closes out everything circulating in short-form content. Now let us move into the three fuller stories, because this is where the real depth is, and where the line between confirmed fact and speculation needs to be drawn most carefully. The Osimhen situation, explained properly, let me lay this out precisely, because there is a lot of moving detail here, and I want to keep it accurate. Arsenal spent real effort this summer trying to bring Vinicius Jr. away from Real Madrid. That pursuit did not succeed. Following that, attention has shifted, according to a Turkish media outlet with a substantial following, toward Victor Osimhen. I want to be upfront with you immediately. This is being reported by a Turkish outlet, not confirmed directly by Arsenal or by Osimhen's current club. So treat the framing itself as reported interest rather than an agreed deal. What makes this particular story worth taking seriously, even while it remains unconfirmed, is the agent connection. The intermediary who originally arranged Osimhen's permanent transfer away from his previous Italian club and into Turkish football is reportedly now the same person working to engineer a move to Arsenal. That agent's name is Jorge Gardi, and the logic here is straightforward. He already knows the player, he already knows the player's camp, and he already has established relationships on multiple sides of any potential negotiation. If the appetite is genuinely there from all parties, that kind of existing relationship can move things quickly. There is also a wider context worth understanding. Arsenal's sporting director has reportedly spent weeks building on his own connections within Turkish football, connections that have already been credited with facilitating one departure from the club this summer, and with opening conversations about other players potentially moving in the opposite direction. That backdrop makes the Osimhen interest feel more plausible as a genuine option rather than pure speculation, even though it is still unconfirmed. Why the urgency around a new striker at all? The situation with Julian Alvarez appears to be the driving factor. He is reported to have his heart set on eventually joining Barcelona, whether that happens this summer or is delayed until next year. With that reported preference in mind, Osimhen is being positioned as the next best available option to immediately raise the level in the centre-forward position. There is also a reference to previous public praise for Osimhen from a respected former striker, who is said to have highlighted his mentality in front of goal as a quality that separates him from other forwards, a quality that has been described as something Arsenal have been missing in the final third. Now here is the part that adds real weight to how complicated this situation actually is. For this move to work in practical terms, there is a suggestion that the sporting director may need to find a way to move Victor Gyokeres out of the club, potentially even offering him to Barcelona, who are separately known to be in the market for a striker themselves. Let that sink in for a moment. This is not simply Arsenal adding a new forward. This is a scenario where signing one striker could directly depend on exiting another one who is already at the club. That is a significant domino to knock over, and it is far from guaranteed to fall the right way. And time is a real factor here too. There are just over 2 weeks left before the transfer window shuts. Any deal involving an agent-led negotiation, a release situation from a Turkish club, and a potential outgoing sale of an existing forward all needs to happen inside that narrow window. That is a tight sequence of events to complete, and it is one of the clearest reasons to treat this whole situation as unresolved rather than close to done. To summarise where this genuinely stands. Reported interest, yes. A known and credible agent working on it, yes. A logical footballing reason behind the interest, yes. But an actual agreed transfer, no, not yet. This remains at this stage a reported pursuit with real substance behind it, not a completed or even a confirmed deal. The squad rule frustration, explained properly. This one is fully confirmed because it comes directly from Arteta's own post-match comments, so let us go through it properly. Arsenal beat Manchester City 3-0 to win the Community Shield. Arteta has now won this competition 3 times as a manager, adding to 2 previous wins as a player during his time at the club, which on its own is a notable achievement worth acknowledging. But the story that emerged afterward was not really about the celebration. It was about frustration tied to a technical rule. Arteta was only permitted to name 8 outfield players among his substitutes for that match. Because of that limit, 3 players who had travelled with the squad to the match location and trained all week with the group did not make the matchday squad at all. Nwaneri, Gabriel Martinelli and Gabriel Jesus were all left out, purely because of that numerical restriction, despite being fully available and part of the travelling party. Arteta's own words on this were direct. He said it is really sad not to have that kind of availability, that those players deserve to be in the squad, and that he hopes the rule can eventually change, because all 3 remain genuinely important to the team. Importantly, he was also asked whether the decision to leave them out had anything to do with transfer speculation surrounding any of those players, and he shut that down clearly. He described it purely as a technical decision, explaining that he is trying to persuade the Premier League and other clubs to extend the number of players allowed in a matchday squad. His reasoning was tied directly to fixture congestion, pointing out how many games the team plays across a season and how unrealistic the current demands are on a limited group of players. And this is not a new position for him. Back in January of this year, Arteta had already asked the Premier League to increase matchday squad sizes by 2 additional outfield players, which would take the total number of available outfield substitutes to 10. As of now, no changes have been made by decision makers on that front. What I take from this as an analyst is that this is a genuine structural frustration for Arteta, not a one-off complaint born from a single big match. He raised it formally months ago, he raised it again after this game, and the underlying issue, squad size limits colliding with an increasingly packed fixture calendar, has not gone away. It is a story worth watching, not because it will resolve quickly, but because it shows a manager actively lobbying for structural change rather than simply accepting the current framework. The Bruno Guimaraes debut, explained properly. This final story gives us the clearest picture yet of how that Community Shield win actually unfolded on the pitch, and it is worth going through in detail because it tells us something specific about a brand new signing. Arsenal's win over Manchester City started almost immediately, with Riccardo Calafiori scoring inside the opening 30 seconds of the match. Kai Havertz then added a second goal before Martin Odegaard completed the scoring to make it 3-0. That result gave Arsenal the first available trophy of the new season. But a significant part of the build-up to this match, from a supporter perspective, was focused on how a specific debut would go. Bruno Guimaraes was making his first appearance in an Arsenal shirt, and by full time, the response to that debut was clearly positive. He picked up a trophy in his very first official game for the club, and shortly afterward, he posted a message on social media to mark the occasion. His message expressed happiness and excitement about everything ahead, and specifically noted the significance of starting his time at the club with both a debut and a trophy on the very same day. On the pitch itself, Guimaraes lined up alongside Miles Lewis-Skelly through the middle of the park, and by most assessments looked assured in that new red shirt from the very start. Working against a Manchester City midfield that was without Rodri, the pairing was credited with helping dominate that area of the pitch. The statistical detail from his 45 minutes on the field backs that impression up clearly. He completed 18 of 22 attempted passes, he won both of the defensive duels he was involved in, and he made 1 successful clearance. Nothing spectacular in terms of highlight reel moments, but a composed, effective, low-risk debut performance, which is often exactly what a new signing needs in their first outing. What stood out from the coaching side afterward was Arteta's clear confidence in exactly how much value Guimaraes can add going forward, based on what was seen in that first appearance. Taken together, an assured passing performance, a positive defensive contribution, and a manager already expressing belief in his future impact, this points toward a debut that has set a solid foundation, even though there is naturally more still to prove across a full season. So where does all of this leave Arsenal right now? On the confirmed side, they are Community Shield winners, they beat the Premier League champions from Manchester convincingly, their new signings in Tzolis and Guimaraes have both made strong early impressions backed up by direct managerial praise, and their manager is actively pushing for a structural change to squad size rules because he believes his group deserves the flexibility that larger squads across Europe already enjoy. On the unconfirmed side, there is a genuinely interesting but entirely unresolved pursuit of Victor Osimhen, tied to a credible agent connection but complicated by the reported need to move Victor Gyokeres on first, alongside lower-level interest in names like Christian that remain at an early, unverified stage. The picture, taken as a whole, is a club that looks settled and confident in its current identity, while still actively shaping its squad before the window closes. Keep those two threads separate in your head, what is happening on the pitch right now, and what might still happen before deadline day, and you will have a clear, accurate read on exactly where Arsenal stand. That is everything for this breakdown. If you found this useful, the most helpful thing you can do is subscribe, because I will be tracking every one of these threads as they develop, especially anything involving Osimhen and that squad size rule, and I will always tell you clearly what is confirmed and what is still just talk. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.